15-year-old Jessica Keane was a cheerleader and honour student who lived in Wineland Park, Ohio. When she started dating 18-year-old school dropout Sean Thompson, her behaviour began to change. Her mother Rebecca never liked him and forbid her from seeing him. She started rebelling, quit cheerleading, and started to skip school in order to do so. However, when Rebecca learned of this, she placed Jessica in a group home for troubled teens called the Huckleberry House on the 4th of March 1991. After an argument with Sean on the phone on the 15th of March that same year, she left the home to go to the mall. She disappeared and was last seen alive at the bus stop at around 6 p.m. It was believed she was abducted from there. After being missing for 2 days, Jessica was found raped and bludgeoned to death 20 miles from her home near the fence of Foster Chapel Cemetery. Police believe that she was forced or coerced into a car by 1 or 2 men, raped and then held for 6 hours. Sometime in the middle of the night, on the 16th of March, she escaped from her attackers and ran towards the cemetery. Evidence showed that Jessica hid behind several graves, where one of her socks and a knee print was found. While running through the cemetery, she saw a light from a nearby farmhouse. While running towards it, she slammed into a fence post while in complete darkness. This allowed her attackers to catch up with her. They raped her, beat her to death by hitting a tombstone against her head, and finally took a gold pendant with the word "taken" on it. Initially, Sean was questioned as a suspect. Police cleared him after discovering he left for Florida with several of his friends at the time of her murder. DNA evidence also cleared him, and the case grew cold. Jessica's family had since placed a cross at the fence post that she collided with in the cemetery in order to keep her memory alive. The case was solved after 17 years after Jessica's murder. Marvin Lee Smith was arrested for her abduction, rape, and murder in April 2008 after his DNA matched evidence recovered from her body. He had been charged with assaults against 2 Columbus women and was out on bond when she was killed. He eventually was convicted for 2 Columbus attacks and served 9 years in prison. Since he was a felon, he had to submit his DNA, which led to the match. Smith then confessed to Jessica's murder, and his details from the confessions matched with that at the crime scene. He also confirmed that he was the only person responsible. In February 2009, he pled guilty to aggravated murder, kidnapping, and rape, and was sentenced to life in prison, and will not be eligible for parole until 2038. 57-year-old Joe Harvey and his 54-year-old wife Mattie were a couple that lived in the small town of Lewis Chapel Mountain, Tennessee, which is north of Chattanooga. For years, they ran a combination gas station and convenience store. It was the only place to buy gas and groceries for miles around. According to Joe's brother Ed, it was common knowledge that they kept cash receipts in the store. He suggested that they keep the money elsewhere to prevent robberies. However, they trusted the community members and did not feel they needed to protect it. On the 4th of March 1991, a local sheriff was called to Joe and Mattie's house because their store was not opened as scheduled. He found that the entire place had been damaged by fire. There was no trace of them inside. Agents from the Tennessee investigation team were brought into the scene. A 2-gallon gasoline can was found on the kitchen counter. Blood spots were found outside and throughout the inside of the house. Investigators believed that Joe and Mattie had been attacked and kidnapped from their house, with robbery being the motive. They believed the fire was deliberately set to cover up the crime. Their 27-year-old niece, Cheryl Holland, vanished just a few days later. They did not have children of their own, but they were close to their extended family. They were especially close to Cheryl and her 5-year-old daughter. 1 week after Joe and Mattie vanished, Cheryl's pickup truck was found abandoned at a truck stop 2 hours from home. Investigators found the keys were still inside. Next to it, they found a necklace belonging to her. Her pocketbook was found in it as well. This led investigators to believe that she may have been abducted. Investigators next questioned Cheryl's 30-year-old husband, Eddie Wooten. He said that before she vanished, she took him to Newport News, Virginia. He claimed that they stopped somewhere along the way to sleep, but he couldn't remember where. Other inconsistencies in his story made investigators suspicious. They suspected that he and Cheryl may have been involved in Jo Matty's disappearance. However, her family could not believe this. On the 10th of March, Eddie was questioned again. He claimed that in late February, he had taken Cheryl to the hospital in Knoxville for a week-long treatment for stomach cancer. He claimed that he could not remember its name. Relatives had told investigators that she had borrowed money from them to use for cancer treatments. Investigators determined that she used it for other things. On the day Eddie claimed that he took her to Knoxville, investigators confirmed that she was actually working in Chattanooga. Confronted with the many inconsistencies, he decided to confess to the truth. He gave the same confession 3 different times. In it, he stated that on the 2nd of March, Cheryl came home from work, stating that she needed more money. They planned on going to her mother's home to pick up the paycheck. Along the way, they went to a gas station and purchased a gas can, which they filled up. After visiting her parents, Eddie and Cheryl went to Jo Matty's house to rob them. He claimed that they went inside. They left their daughter and 6-week-old son in the truck. As they were about to go inside, she told him that they had to kill them. He was unwilling to do so, but she persuaded him. After entering, she talked to Jo briefly and then went to get Matty. A few seconds later, Eddie came in and shot Jo while he was watching TV. Matty ran to the living room and was also shot. Eddie and Cheryl then took Jo and Matty's bodies and placed them in the trunk of their own car. He followed her as she drove over the Alabama state line and into the Tennessee River near the Bridgeport Ferry. Later, she returned to Jo Matty's house, stole $150,000 in cash, and set the house on fire. Investigators found a bloody fingerprint on the bottom of a gas can found in Jo Matty's house. It was matched to Cheryl's known thumbprint. A search of the Tennessee River near Bridgeport Ferry began. On the 17th of April, 1991, Jo Matty's car was found in the river, with their bodies in the trunk. Both had been shot in the head, just as Eddie described. He was charged with the murders, and a warrant was issued for Cheryl's arrest. Investigators began tracking Cheryl's movements following the murders. They learned that she left their children with her mother. They also learned that an unidentified man appeared to be following her. At around 9:30 p.m. on the 7th of March, 5 days after the murders, she arrived at a service station in Greenville. Just seconds after entering it, she told the clerk she had to leave. After she went back to her truck, a bearded man wearing a leather jacket tried to talk to her. She left, and he followed her, driving a red truck. About an hour later, Cheryl was spotted using a payphone at a truck stop, 12 miles from the previous station. She told her family that she was about 2 hours from home. Later, another witness spotted 2 people talking in her truck. The unidentified man was apparently seen at her workplace on the day before the murders. She was seen writing him a check. Investigators are uncertain how this man was connected to the case. She was last seen at the truck stop at around 11:30 p.m. on the night of the 7th of March. Her family believed that the unidentified man was responsible for her disappearance. However, investigators were certain that she was still alive and on the run. The case was broadcast on Unsolved Mysteries on the 26th of February 1992. Thanks to a viewer's tip, just 45 minutes after the case was aired, Cheryl was arrested in Rollingwood, Texas, at the convenience store where she had worked for 6 months. She was living under the pseudonym Amy Forrester. Her colleagues were shocked about her double life. 4 days later, Cheryl was returned to Tennessee to face the murder charges. She pleaded guilty and was spared the death sentence. She and Eddie are now serving life sentences for the murders. She will not be eligible for parole until November 2021. He becomes eligible for parole this month.